I never thought a simple trip to the park could turn my world upside down, but that morning it did. The sun was bright, birds were singing, and everything felt ordinary until I saw him, standing across the fountain as if no time had passed at all, and my heart stopped. His hair was a little longer, his face more serious, but the way he smiled at something on his phone made me remember every memory I had tried to bury: the long walks after school, the coffee shop where we had shared our first laughs, the careless promises we had made to each other when we were younger, and suddenly it all came rushing back. I froze, unsure if I should approach him or run, unsure if he even remembered me, and as he looked up our eyes met, and I felt the familiar pull, the kind you think only happens in movies, that sudden electricity that makes you forget everything else around you. I tried to calm my breathing, told myself it had been years, that life had moved on, that we were different people now, but I could see the old warmth in his eyes, the same one that had made me fall for him in the first place. He took a step toward me, hesitant, like he was afraid I might disappear. And I felt a mix of hope and fear so strong I almost wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him why he was here, in this small city we had both left behind, why now after all these years, but before I could open my mouth, a man came rushing past, bumping into him, and his phone flew out of his hand, sliding across the wet pavement. I bent down instinctively to pick it up, and when I handed it back our fingers brushed, sending a jolt through me I did not expect. He chuckled softly, a sound I had missed more than I realized, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning just for us. We started walking together without saying much, the silence full of things neither of us dared to speak, memories mingling with the present in a way that was dizzying. I noticed the way he looked at people, noticing small details, the kindness in his gestures, the way he made the world feel lighter just by existing, and I remembered why I had fallen for him so easily. He finally spoke, asking if I was still working at the bookstore downtown, and I laughed softly, telling him I was, and he smiled in a way that made me feel seen, like I mattered more than I had in years. We passed the fountain again and he stopped, looking at the water as if deciding something important, and I waited, heart hammering, afraid and excited all at once. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, plain, with my name written in a handwriting I knew instantly, the one he had used to write me notes in high school. My hand shook as I took it, feeling the paper under my fingers, the memories rushing back in waves, every laugh, every tear, every secret shared. I wanted to ask him what it was, but he only said, "You need to read this," and turned away, his expression unreadable, leaving me with a sudden ache I could not name. I opened the envelope carefully, afraid of what I might find, and inside was a single sheet of paper with words that made my stomach drop. Words that sounded like he had been holding on to them all these years. Words that hinted at a choice, a mistake, and a secret I could not have imagined. I felt my pulse race as I read, my hands trembling, heart breaking and soaring at the same time, because what he had written made it clear he had never stopped thinking about me, never stopped hoping we might find a way back. Yet there was something missing, something dangerous, something that made me question everything I thought I knew about him and about myself. I looked up to see him walking toward the street, watching me, and I realized he was leaving, and I had to decide if I would chase him, confront him, or let him go again. The city around us suddenly feeling too small, too loud, too full of possibility and fear all at once. I wanted to run, to throw my arms around him, to demand answers, but my feet felt like they were rooted to the ground, and I watched as he disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with the envelope, the weight of his words, and a feeling I had not felt in years, the kind that could change everything if I let it. I turned the paper over, looking for more clues, more explanation, and then I saw a line that made my blood run cold and my heart beat faster than I thought possible. A line that suggested that someone else knew, that someone else had been watching, and suddenly the simple meeting in the park was not so simple anymore. It was the start of something bigger, something I could not ignore, something that would pull me into a story I had never expected to be part of. I folded the letter slowly, trying to steady my hands, trying to tell myself to breathe, but I could feel the city humming around me, full of unknowns, full of moments I could not control, full of choices that could lead to happiness or heartbreak. And I realized that today, the ordinary morning, the casual walk in the park, had become a turning point, the moment everything I thought I understood about my life and love could change forever. And as I turned to leave, trying to follow some instinct I did not fully understand, I saw him again across the fountain, looking back at me with a face full of questions and longing, and in that instant, I knew there was no turning back, that this was the beginning of something that would sweep me away, something unexpected, something that would change everything there. As I walked home clutching the envelope, my mind was already slipping back into memories I had tried to keep buried. The first time I had met him in the crowded hallway of our high school, how he had tripped over his backpack and spilled his books everywhere, and how I had laughed so hard I almost cried while helping him pick them up. The awkwardness of that moment breaking into a shared smile that somehow felt like the start of everything. I remembered our first real conversation, sitting under the big oak tree in the park during lunch, talking about dreams too big for our small town. The way he listened with genuine curiosity, the way I felt seen in a way no one else had ever managed, and how we discovered we both loved the same obscure movies, the same kind of music, and how every small coincidence felt like fate nudging us closer together. Our afternoons became filled with spontaneous adventures, bike rides to the edge of town, laughing until our sides hurt, quiet evenings at the bookstore where we traded favorite novels, our hands brushing occasionally, sending sparks I did not know how to name, the kind of connection that seemed unbreakable. I could still feel the thrill of the day he had surprised me with a picnic near the river, the sun dipping low golden light spilling over the water, and how he had looked at me like I was the only person in the world, a look so tender it had stayed with me through every lonely moment since. But just as quickly as those days had bloomed, our world had shifted, a misunderstanding that neither of us had addressed, a careless rumor spread by someone who had never understood us, and the sudden distance that grew between us like a shadow neither of us knew how to lift. I remembered the day he had stopped coming to our usual spot in the park, the ache in my chest when I realized he was gone, the letters I had sent that never received a reply, the texts I had typed but never had the courage to send, and the silent months where I told myself life moved on while secretly waiting for him to return. It had been a cruel combination of pride and fear, neither of us willing to reach out, and I remembered the phone call I had seen him make in the cafeteria that last week, the laughter in his voice for someone else, and how I had mistaken it as rejection, when in reality he had been trying to sort things out but never knew how to explain. I could feel the old hurt and longing mixing with the sudden warmth of seeing him again today. A confusing tangle of emotions that made my chest feel too full, too fragile, yet too alive. The envelope in my hand felt heavier. Now, each fold of paper a reminder of unspoken words and unsent apologies, of opportunities lost and memories cherished, and as I read the letter again, I realized it was more than just words, it was a confession, a truth he had been carrying all these years, the explanation I had never received, and the part that stunned me most was a single line mentioning someone else, someone I had assumed had never mattered, someone who had unknowingly caused the rift between us, someone who had seen our bond and tried to interfere without ever realizing the depth of what we shared. My heart raced as I remembered certain oddities from those days, small details I had dismissed, moments that had seemed insignificant at the time, and suddenly they made sense, a puzzle I had carried for years, now fitting together in a way that both hurt and freed me. I could see him clearly in my mind, the way he had looked at me that day he left, the hesitation in his eyes, the flicker of something unspoken, and I understood that it had never been about us not caring, it had never been about indifference or lack of feeling, it had been circumstance, timing, and a misunderstanding amplified by silence, the cruelest enemy of young love. And yet even with that clarity, I felt the old pull, the undeniable gravity that had always drawn me to him. A force that had not weakened despite the years, despite the distance, despite the assumptions we had made about each other. I thought about the times I had imagined running into him, how I had pictured apologies, confessions, and laughter. And now that it had happened, my heart raced in ways I did not remember feeling in years. There was something in his eyes today that told me he had also carried the weight of our lost time, that he had wondered if I had ever thought of him, and the sudden possibility of closure, or maybe a new beginning, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. As I reached the corner of my street, I unfolded the letter once more. And there it was, a line that made me stop in my tracks, a revelation that shifted everything I thought I knew about the past, about him, and about the choices that had separated us. It mentioned a meeting, a day we had both avoided, a secret promise he had tried to honor, a decision made with the best intentions but the worst timing, and suddenly the story of our separation was rewritten in my mind, not as a simple tragedy, but as a twist of fate we had both been powerless to control. I felt a mixture of relief and panic, knowing that this truth could bring us together or push us apart forever, and as I looked up at the setting sun, I realized that the next move was mine, that whatever came next would define the future we had both dreamed of and feared. That the park, the fountain, the envelope, and the memories were only the beginning of a journey neither of us could have predicted, and that tonight, when he called my phone from a number I did not recognize, it would lead to a discovery so profound it would change not just how I saw him, but how I understood the bond that had always existed between us, waiting patiently through the years, resilient, unbroken, and ready to demand its moment in the light that I saw him again that evening, standing just outside the small cafe where we had planned to meet, and my stomach twisted with anticipation and nerves, the sun casting a golden glow on his face, highlighting the same smile that had haunted my dreams for years, and I felt like time had folded over itself, bringing us back to this exact moment, full of possibilities and old pain, yet also full of hope. I approached slowly, trying to steady my racing heart, and he turned as if sensing me before I even spoke, his eyes widening just slightly before settling into that familiar warmth that made everything else fade away. I could hear the soft hum of the city around us, people talking, coffee machines whirring, but all I noticed was him, the way his posture seemed both confident and hesitant, the way he shifted his weight as if preparing for a conversation we had both dreamed of but never had. I finally said his name, my voice catching slightly, and he smiled, the kind of smile that made me feel remembered in ways no one else ever had. He said my name back, and in that moment it was more than a greeting, it was a recognition of the years, the distance, the misunderstandings, and everything unsaid that had kept us apart, a bridge that words alone could never build. We sat down at a small table by the window, the golden light wrapping around us like it belonged there, and I could feel the tension and nostalgia mixing in the air between us, heavy and fragile all at once. He asked me how I had been, and I replied carefully, smiling softly, not wanting to spill all the emotions too quickly, knowing that this moment was fragile, delicate, and I did not want to scare it away. He nodded, listening closely, and then he said, "I never stopped thinking about you." And my breath caught because I had replayed these words in my mind countless times over the years, never daring to hope I would hear them spoken aloud. I felt a lump in my throat and I whispered almost involuntarily, "I didn't either." And we both laughed softly, a sound full of relief and disbelief, a sound that made the years apart shrink into something almost tangible, something we could touch and hold now. I remembered the park, the fountain, the letter I had received, the memories flooding back. And I realized that everything had led to this, the reunion, the chance to speak, to understand, to heal, and yet there was still so much unsaid, so much lingering between us. He leaned forward slightly, eyes intense but kind, and I could see the same longing I felt mirrored in him, and I realized that this was not just nostalgia, this was unfinished business, emotions that had been paused, waiting for the right time to restart. I asked him about the letter, about the words that had made my heart race earlier, and he sighed softly, his expression shadowed with regret and hope, saying that he had wanted to tell me in person for years, that the timing had never been right, and that he had been too proud and too scared to make the first move. I nodded, understanding more than I had in years, and I felt a mixture of relief and sadness, because the truth was finally here, but it also reminded me of all the lost time, all the moments we could have shared, all the closeness we had been denied by circumstance and silence. He told me about the choices he had made, about the people who had tried to influence him, and I listened, my heart aching with empathy, realizing that he had been as trapped in our separation as I had been, both of us acting out of love and fear in equal measure. I asked him why he had never reached out, why he had let the silence grow, and he looked down for a moment, then back at me, eyes glistening, saying softly that he had feared rejection, that he had feared I had moved on, that he had been waiting for the right moment that never seemed to arrive, and I felt my chest tighten with understanding and compassion. I told him how I had thought about him every day, how I had wondered if he remembered, if he regretted, if he had missed me, and he reached across the table, gently touching my hand, and I felt an electric warmth run through me, a reminder of the connection we had always shared, unbroken despite time, unshaken by distance. The city hummed around us, and yet it felt like we were in our own world, one filled with possibility, where words mattered, where glances could convey decades of emotion, where each moment was charged with meaning, and I realized that the spark that had drawn us together years ago had never faded. It had merely waited for this reunion to ignite again. He leaned closer, whispering something I almost did not hear, a hint of a confession, a promise unspoken, and I felt my heart lurch with anticipation and fear, because I knew that whatever he was about to say could change everything again, could make the path forward brighter or more complicated, and I was ready to hear it, even if it hurt. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared past and the potential of our future pressing down. And I realized that the choices we made from this point onward mattered more than anything before. That every word, every glance, every breath we shared could define what we had and what we could become. Just as I opened my mouth to ask him the question that had been burning inside me since the moment I saw him, the cafe door swung open and a figure entered, someone from his past, someone I had not expected, and my stomach dropped because their presence suggested complications I had not anticipated, secrets I did not know, and a story far more intricate than I had imagined. And he glanced at the newcomer with a flicker of recognition, hesitation crossing his face, and I knew that the next few moments would demand truth, courage, and honesty from both of us, that the reunion we had dreamed of was about to meet reality, and that the decisions we made now could either finally bring us together or create new distances that neither of us could ignore. The cafe felt suddenly smaller, the noise of the city outside fading until it was just the three of us, him, me, and the figure who had walked in, someone I recognized immediately but whose presence made my heart tighten. And I could feel the years of silence, the months of wondering, the endless questions all pressing into this single moment. And I knew that the truth we had both avoided was finally here, unavoidable and raw. He looked at me first, his eyes soft but serious, and I could see the conflict etched in every line of his face, the hesitation that spoke volumes of the struggles he had carried alone, the guilt and fear he had never voiced, and I realized that the reason we had been torn apart had not been as simple as pride or distance. It had been a web of circumstances we had never fully understood, tangled with the influence of people who thought they knew what was best, and our own inability to speak. I finally spoke, my voice low but steady, asking him to tell me everything, every detail that had kept us apart, and he nodded, swallowing hard, the memories clearly heavy on him, and he began to explain, starting with a promise he had made long ago, a promise to someone else that he had believed was right at the time, a promise that had forced him to step away from me without explanation, a decision he had thought would protect me but had instead left me in confusion and heartbreak. I listened, heart racing, as he described the misunderstandings, the timing that had never aligned, the letters he had written and never sent, the moments when he had tried to reach me but had been intercepted by circumstance and silence, and each word he spoke made me feel the old ache and longing mix with something new, something softer and more forgiving, as if understanding could heal the old wounds. I asked questions, trying not to let my voice shake, wanting clarity but also fearing it, wanting to hold on to the hope that we could bridge the years, and he answered with honesty, with vulnerability, admitting that he had been afraid of losing me completely, that he had thought leaving was the only way to preserve what we had, and I felt tears prick my eyes because I understood for the first time the weight of his choices, the love that had driven them, even if it had been misguided. The figure across from us remained quiet, and I finally realized that this was the person who had influenced the past, the one whose opinions and interference had kept us apart, and I turned to them, my voice steady, asking if they had any idea what they had done, and they looked down, ashamed but unwilling to apologize fully, and I could see that they had not intended harm in the way it had occurred, only acting out of concern or fear, and yet their actions had changed the course of our lives, the timing and the bond we had thought unbreakable. He reached for my hand, and I felt the familiar warmth, the pull of our connection, but I also saw the shadow of uncertainty in his eyes, the question of whether I could forgive and whether the future we both wanted could be real, and I realized that this moment, calm and heartfelt as it was a turning point, a crossroads where honesty met emotion, where understanding met choice, and where the decisions we made next would define whether we rebuilt what we had or let it fade like so many years had before. I asked him if he had ever stopped thinking about me, and his answer was immediate, raw and certain, that not a day had passed without me in his thoughts, that every smile, every failure, every quiet moment had been colored by memories of what we shared, and I felt my chest tighten because I had carried the same weight, the same longing, and the same fear of speaking first. Then he leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper, and said that there was something else, something I needed to know, a truth he had only just discovered about the day we had lost contact, a revelation that could change everything I thought I understood about our past, and I realized that even now, years later, the story was not complete, that there was another layer of circumstance, another twist of fate, another test of trust and love waiting for us. I felt my hands tremble slightly as he hesitated, looking into my eyes for permission to speak, and I nodded, heart pounding, because I knew that whatever he revealed next could either heal the years of silence completely or shatter the fragile hope we were building now. And I understood that the next words, the next truth would demand everything from me: my courage, my understanding, my willingness to forgive, and possibly my willingness to let go if it proved too much. The moment stretched, suspended between the past and the future, between fear and hope, as he took a deep breath, and I could feel the gravity of what was about to be revealed, the weight of history, the depth of love, and the possibility of a new beginning, all colliding in the quiet hum of the cafe, leaving me on the edge of a decision I could no longer postpone, knowing that the next heartbeat, the next word, would change everything we had thought we knew about each other. And as he finally began to speak, I realized that life had brought us full circle, to this calm but pivotal moment, and that the choice we were about to make would echo through every year that had passed, demanding honesty, trust, and the courage to face the truth together or walk away with the ache of what might have been. When he finally spoke the truth, the secret that had hung over us like a shadow all these years, I felt a strange mixture of shock and relief, as if the weight I had carried for so long was suddenly lifted just enough to breathe, and the story of our separation made sense in a way I had never imagined, the misunderstanding, the interference, the miscommunication all falling into place, revealing that neither of us had truly let go, and that love had quietly survived in the spaces between, waiting for clarity, waiting for courage, waiting for this very moment. I listened to every word, the confession calm but filled with emotion, and with each sentence my heart softened, the hurt and confusion of the past melting into understanding and compassion, and I realized that the distance, the silence, and the lost years had not broken us, they had only tested the strength of what we shared, and I felt tears prick my eyes as I took his hand in mine, feeling the warmth, the familiar spark, the undeniable connection that had never faded. He explained that he had tried to protect me, that he had thought stepping away was the right choice, and that he had carried regret every day, believing I might never forgive him, while I realized I had felt the same guilt for holding on to assumptions and not reaching out, and together we laughed softly, a sound full of relief and the release of old pain, a sound that seemed to echo through the years we had lost. We walked together slowly, stepping out into the quiet streets as the city lights flickered on, and I noticed the small gestures that reminded me of who he had always been, the same thoughtful pauses, the same careful attention to detail, the same way he made ordinary moments feel important, and I remembered why I had fallen for him in the first place. We talked for hours, sharing memories and small confessions, laughing at the absurdity of youthful mistakes, and acknowledging the things we had misunderstood about each other, realizing that the past was not something to dwell on with bitterness but something that had shaped the depth of our bond, making every moment of reunion all the more powerful. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, familiar in shape and handwriting, and handed it to me with a smile that made my heart ache and soar at the same time, and I knew immediately it was a message from him, a symbol of love that had never faded, a reminder that no matter the years or distance, our connection had survived, resilient and true. I opened it carefully, my hands trembling slightly, and inside was a single sheet of paper with words that reflected every emotion we had carried, every hope and regret, and the message was simple but profound, telling me that our story was still being written, that the choices we made now could be for love and renewal, and that no one could take away what we had built in memory and in heart. We stopped by the fountain where we had first reunited, the water sparkling in the evening light, and he held my hand, looking into my eyes with the honesty and warmth that had never wavered, and in that quiet moment, I felt everything align, the years, the pain, the waiting, all converging into a sense of peace and possibility, a feeling that life had given us a second chance to choose each other without fear. I realized that love had been patient all along, and that forgiveness was not just about absolving mistakes, but about recognizing the strength it took to endure separation and still return, ready to embrace the future together, and I felt my heart swell with a calm joy I had not known I could feel. We lingered there, hand in hand, letting the city move around us, feeling the pulse of life, the rhythm of shared breaths, and the quiet assurance that this time, nothing would pull us apart, that the past had led us here for a reason, and that the bond between us had grown stronger for every moment of longing and uncertainty. As the last light of the day faded into a gentle twilight, he whispered softly, telling me that every step he had taken, every choice he had made, had led him back to me, and I nodded, my voice catching slightly as I said the same, realizing that the journey we had endured was not a burden but a testament to the love that never gave up, never faltered, and had waited patiently for this perfect, fragile, unshakable moment. And as we stood there together, watching the water reflect the first stars of the evening, I felt a quiet certainty that this reunion was not the end of a story, but the beginning of the rest of our lives, a life written by the heart, guided by understanding, and sealed by the kind of love that had never faded, leaving me with a final thought that felt like it could last forever, that some connections are timeless and some hearts, no matter the years apart, are meant to find each other again.